Hi everyone, this is Vivi. Happy spring is finally here. I'm just really excited to have more daylight, and I feel that my energy is starting to rise up a little more, and my sleep is getting slightly better. So I'm very excited to finally getting more daylight, and hopefully I have more time to explore the outdoors soon and get back to my van life. But in this video, I have a very special message that I want to share with you about freedom. I recently collaborated with Terry from What's the Value podcast, and we had a very interesting conversation around the value of freedom. What is freedom? And do we actually have freedom now, even though there's no war? At least in this part of the world, there's no war. Then we technically think, oh, because we do not live in World War II anymore, so does that mean we're really free? So it's the conversation that will get you to contemplate about your life. Hopefully, it will help you to open your mindset and gain a new, different perspective about life, about freedom. I think that Terry asked me very practical and very real questions that may be resonating to the freedom seekers like you out there. So I think you will gain some valuable insights about this conversation and what the freedom really is. Are we really free? And does that mean that freedom doesn't come with responsibility? So those are the things that we explore about. Hopefully you enjoy this conversation, and let's get into it.
All right, V, thank you so much for being on. Super excited for this conversation. So I will ask, what is the value that's most important to you?
Hi Terry, it's my pleasure to be here. So this one is very easy questions for me because I have been following my value for the last several years now, and my highest value is freedom.
Mm,
Um, and I mean freedom in pretty much everything. And what I mean is not just like freedom, like financially or like free time. What I mean is more like a spiritual freedom,
mm,
like the ultimate freedom, like free to be yourself, um, free to follow your passion, to do what you actually love. And so it's pretty much similar to your value to Terry's, which is authenticity.
mm,
So for me, it's like having that freedom to be my authentic self.
mm,
Um, because I think that even with authenticity, we constantly going to be evolve, right? We're constantly going to grow, and as we grow, our authenticity actually also changes
mm,
according to our level of growth as well. And so if we don't have that, first of all, if we don't acknowledge it, we don't know that there's that path of growth, then we're just gonna keep losing ourselves,
mm,
because I think that in this society, we are so lose touch of ourselves, and that's the reason why we get lost. That's the reason why we don't know what to do in this life,
mm,
and that's the reason why we have this suffering.
mm,
Like we don't know how to be adult,
mm,
right? There's just so many problems to deal with because we don't know who we are. So
mm,
how can we be authentic with ourselves if we don't know who we are,
mm,
right? And so that's the reason why I yearn for this freedom um, to it's like a path of a process for me to continue to grow, continue to know who I am, so that I can be authentic with myself.
mm. So it's interesting. It's almost as if you're saying that freedom, as you said what you value is that process that freedom allows you, because you don't actually know what you want yet or what's going to make you happy or where you're going to be 5 years from now. But you know, if you have freedom and you can follow that process, you have a much better chance of getting there. I've never thought of it in that way, but that makes a lot of sense. Let me ask this question, B. And in some ways there may be an obvious answer, but I think we'll get deeper. Why? And so some people could listen to this and say, that seems simple enough. So just have freedom to do what you want. Why is freedom so hard? Why is it something that maybe most people don't have? Or maybe asking it differently, what's the counter for you? If you didn't have freedom, what does that look like? Like, why not everybody just having that freedom?
I know, I think like this question may seem like on the surface, but it's actually a very deep and profound, right? Because we actually don't know that we are being restricted because we are being programmed, we're being indoctrinated. And so it's, I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of the subconscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like we are actually governed 95% by our subconscious, and it's called subconscious for a reason because we don't know that it exists. Like this program, we don't know if it exists, but we just do it kind of like a robot, right? And so if we are being programmed in a bad way and we don't even know that we are being programmed, then how do we know that we're free? You know? And so like 5% we are being conscious, 95% it's like we asleep, we don't know. Like when you wake up and you brush your teeth, sometimes you don't even think about it, you brush your teeth, but at least that's a good habit. But like 95% of the time may not be all of the good habits, it's may all of like bad habits, and bad habits lead you to bad ways of thinking, and bad, I mean, in the relative way, the consequences that you may receive according to the actions that you do, right? And so if you keep having negative habits and negative actions, and that's the reason why you keep creating negative consequences within ourselves, and that's why we suffer. And so what we need is the freedom to actually understand that, oh, we are not free now because we are actually being programmed and indoctrinated from generation to generations. And if we don't know that we are not free, then we're stuck, right? We can not let ourselves to grow and evolve.
So take it a step further, right? Because I agree with everything you're saying. I think the next logical question becomes, okay, even if you acknowledge that you're not free for all the reasons you're saying, is it possible to actually become free? Can you actually overcome all that programming in the subconscious mind? And I think your answer is going to be yes, which I'm curious to hear. Like, what does freedom actually look like then? How do you get to it? What does it look like?
It's actually not a very easy process, right? For me, it's all about, in my book, I actually write about the 7 stages of alchemy, and that was the process for me. But the first stage is all about shifting your paradigm, your way of thinking. And the way it happened is by a catastrophe, like a tragic event that happened to actually knock me out of my head, like push me to the ground and actually rethink about my life. Oh, like everything I did is wrong now because it didn't work out, and I was so stressed and depressed. Like I had to do something else differently, because if I don't, I'm just gonna keep sinking and sinking. So you know, and a lot of time when we see these challenges happen, our first reaction is going into fear, and right, and it makes sense because we needed to be safe, we needed to survive. But if you keep clinging to your old way of thinking and your old way of living, then you're not gonna be able to get to the next level. You're still gonna keep create the same circumstance, the same challenge. It's like what Einstein said, right? You cannot solve the problem with the same way of thinking that you created. And so you have to go to the next level in order to solve your problem. And so the first thing is the paradigm shift. The like you have to acknowledge and aware that this way of thinking is no longer working. Like this lifestyle is no longer working, and you have to keep searching for something else. So it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of determination to actually do it, right? Because if you keep reacting out of fear, you're gonna keep pushing yourself down the rabbit hole, like further and further.
So it's almost like the paradigm shift, the maybe the adversity, the tragic event, back in terms of the freedom as we were talking about it, it's like before you can even embrace freedom or achieve freedom, you first have to realize that there's a need for it. And the recognition of the need for it is, for many people, and I think myself very much included falls into this, you live a bunch of your life not recognizing you're not free and kind of just following a set path that you've kind of been programmed based on your parents or your upbringing or society or whatever it is. It's only once you have something that forces you to realize that this path you're on may not get you to the outcome you want, that logically then that forces you to be like, oh, does that mean there's a choice for me to approach it differently? And once you start to think about that different approach, that different choice, that's where freedom comes in. Because prior to that point, it's almost like you are just on a set path, and the freedom is recognizing that I need to take a different way because this path isn't going to get me to where I want to get to. That's kind of the mechanic.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That was actually my path. Not necessarily that it happens to everyone, but of course, I would think that we all face certain challenge in our own life. Some may be more significant or bigger or more hurtful than the others. But yeah, it's not necessarily that you have to face like a certain catastrophe in order to shift your paradigm. But sometimes like you can just hear the teaching from a coach or a teacher, and if that click to you, it's going to get you to think about your own way of living as well. And so it's the first thing is all about awareness, right? You have to be aware that our essential show is, yes, perfect, but who we are is not perfect. And that's the reason why we constantly need to change and evolve and grow, because we come to this life in the body so that we can have the experience. And that experience is for us to continue to grow our evolution at the soul level. And so and because we're being restricted in this 3D body, that means we're already not free, right?
Yeah, and I wonder, maybe I'll get a little deeper and philosophical for a second. So let's assume somebody goes through that, right? They get to the point where they say, geez, I didn't even realize this path I was on, I was programmed for it, I need to view it differently. One of the things I often wonder is that even from that point forward, when you make that realization and you decide I want to do something differently, every reference point in your mind, every thought, every value is still rooted in that original programming. So it's like, how do you actually, it's almost like you have to erase all of that. And because otherwise you may think you're free now and you're acting differently, but you're still rooted in that same programming. So, and maybe that's what you're getting at, V, where it's really hard. How do you make that jump? How do you go from being programmed to truly being free?
So that's the reason why they said it's a journey from the head to the heart. It's the longest, the hardest distance. So you would have to use your heart as the compass, and how to use it can be very difficult because we are all trained to make decisions logically. We are not really familiar with how we feel or even expressing emotion, even like crying, right? We're not allowed to cry. And so we have been conditioned to block our emotion and block how we feel. And eventually we lose that touch with our heart. And that is the biggest compass to let you know which direction to go or what path that you need to take. And so for me, how did I do it? I actually just took a leap of faith. And when I was at that blank slate, I decided to make the difference. Like, because I lived in a very logical world. I was raised in Asian family, and my background was in engineering. So I used my left brain constantly for everything. And so, like, even just feeling was very foreign for me. Like making decision by the heart was very foreign to me. And once I was asking for, I was questionings about my life, like because I already lost everything that I had at that time, and so I was like, what next? Like, what am I supposed to do now, right? So, and I was searching a lot of books, personal development books, and I was like, there has to be something for me to learn. Like, how can people succeed and I cannot succeed, right? So one of the book that came to me was the Alchemist Book, and it's a novel. It's a fictional book, but there's a lot of wisdom in that book. And the biggest lesson that I was able to relate to was to listen to your heart and follow your passion. So when I was already at the blank slate, and it's like nothing actually really worked for me anymore. So I was asking myself, what is it that I feel like I'm doing? What is it that I want to be? Like, what is it that I want to do now that I already lost everything? And the answer for me was just to travel. I just wanted to travel. I just wanted to see the world. I wanted to be free. I want to express my desire to be free, and traveling is one way for me to express that freedom. So it's like in the bottom ground, I knew at the deep core that freedom was what I wanted, and how do I want this freedom to look like? And that was traveling for me. And so I was just following this lead one step at a time. And that was how it got me into this whole healing journey, like soul journey of of freedom, and constantly evolving and changing who I am. Like every year, like I feel like I keep becoming like a different person and keep shedding the layers. And I, even when I was doing that, I started to change and shift my perspective. I didn't know like how much it would change me or what kind of freedom that I would get. But when I let go of um, my perspective of what freedom actually looked like in the materialistic world, and listen to my heart and what that actually looks like for me, that was when everything started to change.
So if I could, because I think I really want to dig into what you're saying, but just for context, to the extent you're comfortable talking about it, what can you talk a little about for you, what actually got you to that point, what it was, the event that led to it, or what you talked a little bit about your life before, right? Brought up in Asian culture, very logical engineering background. What was it that rattled you into saying, I need to rethink all of this?
So I was in the US for 12 years in my life, since I was a teenager. I came to the US from Vietnam, studying there and working there for 12 years. So in some way, I kind of consider it my home. And I got a pretty good job in Boston after I graduated from grad school. The job was exactly what I wanted. I mean, in terms of like the salary, and it was giving me the H-1B visa that I needed in order to stay in the country. That was what I wanted, because I thought H-1B visa would give me a green card later on, so I could get my citizenship in the US, and that was my path of freedom. Right? I thought if I could get the green card, then I could stay in the country, and I don't have to afraid of switching different employers, and I would have more freedom to do whatever I want. So that was my perception of freedom. However, the job didn't go really well for me. I hated it really much. Um, nothing nothing was exactly what I envisioned it to be. Like I thought, oh, this is my dream job. The job was just so repetitive and boring. It was not at all creative, like what I wanted, and the boss would just keep harassing me, and it was a very stressful environment because I was working in the hospital as well. So because I was on H-1B visa, if I lost a job, then I would have to leave the country immediately. And at that point, I kind of consider US was my home. I didn't want to leave the country. And going back to Vietnam, I would have to face my family being a failure, and I would have to face the fear of shame and all that. And I was afraid of losing everything that I was building up to for more than a decade. Because of that visa. But because the job didn't work out well, so eventually I lost it and I had to leave the country. And my perception about what freedom was then completely crashed. That's my vision. Everything that I wanted to build in my life is completely is like the castle in the sand that was washed away by the wave just in an instant, right? Because really, like I was not allowed to stay in the country. The moment that I lose my job, I would have to leave the country immediately. And so I was like, that's it, 12 years of my life. Like I spent already so much money and effort in education and hundreds of $1,000s in education and 12 years of my life, and for what? And now I was like at the bottom ground, and what do I want to go from here? And I hated that life so much because it constantly felt like pressure, and I didn't like who I was because I constantly have to suppress myself in order to please other people, to make my coworkers, my bosses happy, because I just wanted to hold on to the job, right? And so it felt like I was carrying a rock on my shoulder every day, and I ended up having back pain for months. So my back pain actually gradually disappeared afterward, after I went back to Vietnam, like about a year after. Because for all those years, I carried so much stress on myself. I wasn't being who I truly am, and I just wanted to stay in the country. So I had to keep my head down and please everyone and give getting higher degrees, higher status in order to stay in that country. And because to me, having the green card was the freedom. And that was the freedom that I associated with the 3D paradigm, 3D way of thinking, because it's all about materialism. It's not to the point that I have to suppress myself, I have to lose myself in order to get that freedom. And so you see the contradiction there, right? So if you lose yourself, then how can you get that freedom? Eventually something gonna happen and it's gonna burst.
What was the narrative in your head at that time, B, before you lost it, before you started to realize? Was it a conflict in your head where you were saying to yourself, this can't be right, it doesn't feel right, I hate it, but my family or whatever it is tells me, or I think there's something good to this? Or did you actually in that moment convince yourself that this was the right path, and it's just, you're like, back pain, that's weird, not sure where that's coming from, like this job doesn't seem great, but this has still got to be the right path? Like, how much conflict did you have in your own head before you hit that kind of breaking point?
Oh my God, so much conflict. even when I was at breaking point, I still didn't know. I was just afraid, and I was just in victim mode. Like, oh,
Mm,
why did everything happen to me? And I blame my own origin for being a Vietnamese. Like, why was I have to be born there? And life is
mm,
so difficult for me. Because I was Vietnamese, so it's like everything has to be harder for me. I have to work so much harder than everyone else. And still I didn't get that freedom.
mm,
And for me to be able to travel to other places, to be a nomad, that wasn't really possible because I'm Vietnamese, my passport doesn't work. Like I can go hopping around different places, different country. So I blame a lot on my own root. I blame that why life is so easy for other people, but not for me.
mm.
I blame my boss. Um, so it's a lot of victim mentality. And even when I got the job, I knew uh, is in the gut feeling, that something isn't wrong. You can feel that. And I knew that something was wrong, but it was the only job that offered me H-1B visa. So I had to go with it. It wasn't very easy to get H-1B visa offer
Mm.
during that time. I graduated in 2013 and I got the job in 2014. So yeah, during that time, there's a lot of restriction around H-1B visa. So if you get it, you're not just lucky, but you have to be on the top of your
Yeah.
field in order to uh, not just the job offer, but to get the H-1B visa because it's extremely competitive.
Mm,
Um, and so that's the reason why I went against my gut and I was just going for it. And
mm,
it was just like and I looking back now, I knew that it was the wrong direction, but it's right at the same time because if I didn't go through that experience, I would not um, come out to be the person I am today. But that was the life-changing experience for me because if I could have make a different decision and have a better job, I would stay stuck in the corporate world. And I don't know who that person would be. And I
mm.
would be in that a boring life, like having a 9 to 5 office instead of like having an adventurous in Canada, living the van life, explore the world, and being an author and inspiration for other people.
Well, let me ask you about that because I think that's really interesting. To your point before about it's the heart, right? You have to follow the heart. You talk about your gut and following that. If you go back to when you got the visa, you have the job, right? You've spent so much time, as you mentioned. I'm sure there was some family pressure of that's what you're supposed to do. I could envision a scenario where if you thought about even before you left that job, if you thought after you got it, if you said, you know what, I'm not going to take this job, it doesn't feel right to me. There would have been another
Mm,
part of you where it would have felt
mm,
wrong for you not to take it. You would have felt like my
mm-hmm.
family's going to be disappointed. So that
Yeah.
emotion that you speak of, in some ways, it can go both ways. And I think that's where it gets really hard for people, where they're like, well, how do I know which gut feel to really trust? Because on one hand, my gut tells me I can't quit this job. That would be crazy of me. But on the other hand, it tells me I have to because this isn't who I am. How do you distinguish that?
Um, I think that whatever decisions that you make is still gonna give you back to the same path, right? For me, um, I now I learn to make decisions by the heart, but back then I didn't know, right? I would just make decisions based on what's logical, like which job would be better in terms of like different benefits, right? So I think that it's okay to make the wrong decision
Mm,
because once you make the wrong decision, then at least you know that it's wrong, and then it's gonna steer you back into the right path. Like for me, I think that all of those choices was wrong, even if I could have like a different offer. Um, it would still be wrong. And I think the same thing would still gonna happen, but it may happen at a later time instead of with this current job that I hated really much. So it's all about your perspective and how you actually see it, because I think that doesn't matter which direction, what choices that you make, something is going to happen. And because you're still going to have that that same way of thinking, when you still have the same way of thinking, you're still going to create the same reality. Doesn't matter which path that you actually take.
So in hindsight, right? Like, let's say you could go back and talk to yourself before you took that job. Do you think there's anything you could have said to yourself in that moment that would have had you realize, you know what, I'm going to go move to Canada now, and we'll get into it, right? And the traveling. Like, I guess what I'm asking is it possible to realize these things and kind of take the shortcut route to who you should really be? Or do you have to just let it play out how it happens and hope you got, and to your point, get back to where you should be anyway?
I think that you should just let everything to experience the way that it is instead of taking the shortcut. Because if you don't have the experience, if you don't go through that pain, you're not gonna come out as strong as you are now. It's like in the the caterpillar that turns into the butterfly, right? The metamorphosis. Now, when it's almost finished to the metamorphosis is about to finish and the butterfly is about to take wings, but it still have a layers of that cocoons around it, right? But if you rip off that layer to help the butterfly, it's not going to be able to fly. It's gonna die because it doesn't know how to fly. And so it would have to come out the way that it is. It have to go all through that mess and all through that struggles to be as strong as it is now, and to be able to fly by itself. And so if I could go back in time and talk to myself, I was like, just take it easy. It's gonna be okay by the end.
Well, and it's funny because you could bring it back to your book even, and in general, even my podcast, everything we do, it begs the question, like, what do you hope people take from your book? Because in the one hand, you'd say, well, I hope they learn, and they could in some ways take that shortcut and realize these things quicker. But then on the other hand, given what you're saying, which I think is true too, you can't rip that cocoon off. They have to do it themselves. So what, somebody that's reading your book, what is the hope for them? What is the objective? Is it just to give them hope and optimism that you could get there? Or is it more tactical than that, to say, here's how you should approach it?
I think that any tactics or any methods that you learn from books, you would have to actually do it yourself. You would have to do the work, and that's the part that trained you in order to fly. I don't think it is a shortcut, but we all need the guide and the help along the way for us to grow and evolve, because if we don't, we're still gonna get lost, even if we have that desire to grow as a person. And hence we have teachers, coaches, and mentors and gurus, right? But not all of these teachings that actually resonate with you. So you would have to, again, here, I always follow my intuition and find the wisdom according to what I'm drawn to, what I want to learn at this time, and what teachers actually resonates with me, what books actually resonates with me. So my way of learning is always be curious. Know that you will always have room to grow, because we are not perfect. We don't know everything, and so when we stay open and curious, we will allow ourselves to constantly learning and growing and observe all the wisdom from the people that we are supposed to learn it from. I don't learn everything from the biggest name in the industry, but I allow my heart to kind of guide me um, uh, to what knowledge and what wisdom I need to learn. Sometimes I learn from my dream time as well. Sometimes I learn from books or from coaching from different sources here and there. Depends on what actually draw me to. Sometimes I even learn from Gaia program, you know. So what I'm really hoping that my book would do for people is first to give them the awareness, because I think having awareness is the most important thing, like the first thing, like knowing that we are all carry this indoctrination and program from generations, and but there's a path of healing. Depends on what is it that you want to choose. But my book is about alchemy, and alchemy is a universal process of transformation and transmutation. It's all about change. We all have to change, like nature have to change, human we have to change, even the universe always constantly expanding and growing. And so that process is inevitable. So are us. So we have to have that awareness and acknowledging it. Once you know that these stages of alchemy and the process of alchemy that you have to go through in your life, once you have more awareness, then you can actually utilize it and living more consciously. And it's also up to you what path you want to go in order to grow yourself. It doesn't necessarily say, okay, this is exactly what you have to do in order to grow, but more so it's asking you to reflect and choose your own path. So you have to reflect on yourself, like where you are now, and or your stage of being, like which stage of alchemy you are in, what challenges that you have to face. And so when you have more knowledge and awareness about that stage, so you can actually ask yourself, like, how can you what can you do, and or how can you overcome this challenge in order to continue growing to the later stages. In my experience, it's kind of the first four stages is more like external forces that kind of push you, but when you go to the later stages, like it's all about your internal personal power that you would have to push yourself to get to the finish line. So it's not a very easy process, but having the awareness of it and you get to understand it, then you can utilize it to work for users and allow things to change and allow things to happen and go with the flow instead of going against the flow. We go against the flow because we don't know. We don't know about the universe. We don't know how everything works. We don't know about life. And sometimes we go against it by will, but sometimes we don't know what we're doing. That's why we're going against the flow of life. And so that's why having awareness is essential in order to help us to understand how the universe works. It's kind of like with the law of attraction as well. A lot of people think that you just envision it and is works well. Well, in a higher level, it works that way, but we human, we have, because we have so much of that indoctrination, we have so much programming to kind of weigh us down. It's anchor our energy down, and that's the reason why we can't manifest. So until we have to grow and evolve and make our energy lighter, that is when we can manifest greater life and greater abundance for ourselves. And so, yeah, I really hope that people can get this message from my book and know that we actually don't live in a free world, even though we think that we are. Maybe we're being tricked to know that we live in a free world. And that's the reason why we have suffering. And that's the reason why we need to go through the healing journey and healing process, and especially at this time now in the world, because I think that we need more freedom now, because all of these things, events like the pandemic and all the crazy events that happens in the world right now, is asking us more and more to reflect on ourselves, and to go through with that healing journey, so we all can be free from the inside, because until then the world is not going to be free. We have to have the freedom within ourselves first, because that would release on the hatred that would, when we return to our eternal self, to our true self, that is when we can find the love for who we are. When we can find the love within yourself, then we can find the love for other people around you, and that's when we can create more peace and true peace and freedom within the world. That's require each of us to do the work first.
Yeah, I like a lot of what you're saying, and I want to ask, because in some ways there's a theme in it, right where you started with freedom, where it's an openness, it's a freedom, as you said, to go with the flow of the world and the universe and life, and we're constantly changing, and that freedom, that true freedom, allows us to do that, and that is what we should strive for. I'm curious, do you think that is the end of the thread there, or is all of that a means to something? Like, if you are truly aware and open and you're kind of going with the flow of life, is that it? Like, wherever it leads you, wherever it goes, you're good? Or is there more to it? Like, how do you know, maybe I'll make it specific for you, how do you know the actions you're taking are in alignment with that, right? And I'm assuming part of the answer is there's a feeling to it, right? That you can feel it, but can you describe that feeling, maybe, right? Like, how do you get to, what are you ultimately trying to achieve in life? Is it still happiness? Like, is it that you're happier and that's what tells you that I'm on the right path? Or what does that look like?
So what it looks like to be alive for me is like seeing a lot of synchronicities, um, and everything, it seems to be more harmonious, like the people around you, and you and work doesn't seem to be so heavy, like you have to grind yourself in order to achieve something. um, so there's a sense of effortless. Whatever you do within your daily life, like how you live, can be incorporated into your work, especially when you do something that involves your passion, your love for something. That's how the effortless come from, because you would just spend your time doing it. So that one part of feeling being more aligned, and just you will start seeing a lot of synchronicities that happen. Is kind of like the synchronicities are the size from the universe. A certain thing is just going to work itself out in order to help you to achieve something that you actually want. And you feel more at ease within yourself. You feel like you love yourself more. Like, I like the version of myself now compared to the old version of myself. um, and the people, the relationships that I have with people is a lot easier. There's not as much conflict, so there's the harmony around it. And and it's just like within yourself, you just feel like there's not a lot of things that can trigger you, make you upset or angry, like you don't react as much. But it's easier to take a step back, and if something that does trigger you, it's much easier to have an awareness and take a step back and process this instead of reacting to it. So it's like there's not a lot of things in the external world can really affect you, like emotionally, like in a bad way. And if it does, even if it does, then you know, oh, that trigger must have something. There's still the impurity within me. So so after you've gone through the process, you realize, oh, what do I need now? What do I need to know about this emotion? Like, why am I being triggered by it? Like, what wound is it? Like, and how I can actually process it. So over time, like, the more you're doing it, the more you're gonna feel so much at ease and at peace within yourself, you know?
What is so I'm trying to think of an example to test. I mean, it sounds amazing. It sounds amazing. I think the parallel you said of like when you do something you're passionate about or you love, right? I think a lot of us can relate to that. Even if we think back to when we were kids and it's playing with our friends outside, or maybe there's a hobby that we have that we love. I think like extrapolating that feeling and saying that's just life now. You just feel like that, like you're kind of in that state all the time is a really good way to explain it. But what about it when things do go wrong? And you started to touch on it. So I want to use like a real example. So I guess, let me ask you, so your life, right? I know you did a lot of traveling. That's what's really important for you. I don't know where you're at in the world now, but let's say I'm trying to make up a scenario. All your money disappears, right? Somehow, maybe you get, your identity gets hacked and all your money is gone and now you can't travel. Somebody would look at that and say, okay, that warrants me being angry. It warrants me starting to think about, I need to change my approach. Maybe I should have been more responsible. Maybe I should have felt more stress in my life because then I would have protected myself against this. Again, just a silly example, maybe, but like, how in your world do you handle that now? How does in the kind of the right way, in the free way that you're saying? Because I think a lot of people would hear what you're saying and say, it sounds amazing, but what about when life kicks me in the face? Like, then what do I do? How am I supposed to handle that and still be happy?
Well, if you say how to learn another lesson, something must have gone really wrong, I think. At the later stage in your life, when you feel like when your action is not about reaction anymore, you don't extract a much negativities into your life. However, to answer your question, if you do have like a catastrophic event, something happened, and it actually did happen to me, actually, like someone just crashed into my van. And but I wasn't inside, so I was okay. So a lot of things that you don't really foresee, and it may just kind of throw at you. So I remember when that happened, I was upset for sure. We actually very normal. We human, so it's okay for us to have like emotion, but then it's okay to just like cry all of it out. It's okay to be upset and be angry, as long as you don't direct it toward someone, that negativity toward someone, then that person gonna pick up on it and it's gonna like transfer it to someone else. So the way that I deal with it is by either by journal. That's the most effective way for me. When I get really angry, I get really frustrated, I get upset, or when I feel fearful, I feel like I'm not good enough for like a certain thing, then I would write it down. Either I meditate first to feel that like swirling emotion within me first, and I would write it down. Everything, I don't think when I write. So you just, it doesn't have to be even complete sentence. It doesn't have to be like the right grammar or correct spelling. I just write whatever that I feel at that time. And when I do that, I suppress my analytical brain, the judgment and all the critical thinking, and just allow myself to feel and have that have that, just all that emotion comes out. And I would just like, after, either it comes with tears, or sometimes it doesn't come with tears, but most of the time it was, you just would cry that out. And when the tears come out, you know that there's the magic that happened, you're gonna feel released afterward. So you're gonna need to have that compassion within yourself first and allow yourself to feel. Even you do not curse anything that actually happened. It's okay to even like be in that victim mode, you know? So you have to have that compassion for your victim first, because you you are limitless, but at the same time in this human body you are not completely limitless. You still feel a sense of powerless, right? So allow for you to feel that first and have the compassion for that part of yourself first. And once all of that emotion comes out, like it's like the cloud is start gonna disappear over time, and then you're gonna feel a little bit better about the events and how everything that actually happens. No, if you don't actually do anything wrong, because that what actually happened to me, I often ask, um, if I didn't like, is there any way that I actually responsible for this event or this thing to actually happen? Because if I am responsible for it, then I would have to take the responsibility to correct it, to make it better. And so this responsibility is like, is it like my energy? Like, do I have any negativities? Is there something within me that still need to change and still need to transform? So that is the first thing that I would ask before I do any I do any correction about the event, right? And so just allow things, if there's some things that I don't know, then I will just wait and be patient for everything to slowly unfold. And then you take the appropriate action toward it. So it was actually frustrating for my vein to get hit, because I would have to look for a place to stay. And I was out of the province, and in Canada, if you're out of province, the insurance is a lot more complicated. And so it was kind of like a whole mess for me, but eventually everything kind of resolved itself out.
And how much stress did you feel throughout that, V? Like, so I get the first point, right? It first happens, you kind of swim in it, journal, let it play out. But now you're looking for that place to stay, or you're on the phone with the insurance company and they're, you're on hold for a half hour and they send you to somebody else and they're not going to pay out as much as they should. Throughout all that, is there stress still in that, or is there this feeling of calm and kind of peace of like, it's just what life is. It's just the journey. I'm kind of going through it.
I think for some moment it feels stress, and some moment I calm myself down. I don't feel like I'm a stress. When I feel stressed, I go into nature. I go running. I go do exercise. So it's about shifting yourself back to the balance. The thing is, like, if you continue to stay in that stressful mode, to stay in that frustration, you're gonna attract more negative activity to come into your life. So you don't want to do that. If you feel stressed, you feel frustration, you need to release this right away. Because if you allow yourself to stay longer in that, something else bad gonna happen. It's not gonna work out the way that you wanted. So you would have to shift yourself back into balance and to staying calm. So that's what I did. And so definitely sometimes when I talk to them, I feel really stressed. But then I'm like, I'm gonna go running. Or I'm gonna go meditate. Sometimes meditation doesn't really work for me when I feel like really a lot of emotion, when I feel really frustrated. So allow yourself that time to really calm down, go out for the run, write it down. Sometimes I cannot meditate. I just write it down and have a friend to talk to vent. Or you can even like record your venting within yourself. So just like one time I actually recorded my voice. I'm just gonna vent it out. I don't care how bad it is. But it doesn't at least direct toward the person or someone else. So all that things just help you to calm down so you don't create the cascading effect.
Well, it's interesting because you said it a couple times, and I think there's a lot of truth to it. Like, as I'm thinking it through my lens, I think stress is part of life, right? And there's always going to be aspects of that. So it's unrealistic. And anybody who says like, no, I'm literally happy all the time is either lying or there's a different problem at play there. But when I think about it for me, and it gets right back to where you started with freedom, like when I do have that stress, let's say it was me and I was on the phone with the insurance company, there is stress in that. But the deeper stress, the stress that allows us to sustain and becomes more painful, is because I'm already thinking about, well, I have to go pick up my son later, or I have to do this for work. And I have to do, once you start layering in all those things that are the opposite of freedom, those constraints of life that you feel like you have, it's so much harder to just let that stress be what it is in the moment, run it off and be done with it, because it's all interconnected to all these other things. I think there's a lot of truth in what you're saying, which is when you've achieved that freedom to say, I'm not tied to anything kind of psychologically or literally in terms of where I need to go, it makes it that much easier to just let the stress come and go and then move on to it. It's when it's deep rooted in those constraints that I feel like it becomes more of a problem, you know?
Right. That's the thing. Like as you go on this journey, you start to realize, because you already learn all the tools, and it's up to you to embody all the tools and all the lessons that you learn in order to stay back in balance, because they're always going to be like external challenges that are going to push you. And so the point here is that you would have to do the work to keep yourself in balance. That in Stoicism, that's what they teach, right? Like no matter what actually happened in the world, it's always gonna stay center, even though you're shifting. So this it's like the pendulum where you're constantly gonna be like shift back and forth, back and forth. But now that you know, now that you learn and you know that you have the capability to keep yourself in balance, so it's really up to you whether you want to do that or not. Or so having awareness can help you to stop it from going down the rabbit hole, like going further and shifting to one side of the scale, you know. So
yeah, and maybe as we're coming towards the end here, the question that I often come back to on this is there any downside to this? Is there any, so right, the idea of listening to your emotions, you know, listening to your gut feel, not kind of getting too caught up in anything and like almost minimizing your expectations of this is what, you know, and all that. Sometimes when I think about that and I push it and I keep pushing on it, I worry about like, does it translate into like lack of ambition, to where sometimes stress, expectations, these things, they become functional because they drive us to accomplish things. But as soon as we set our sights on, I want to accomplish this, right? I want to be the greatest podcaster ever, or whatever it is. It seems contradictory to what you're saying, maybe, right? Because now that I'm no longer free. I've now set this goal. And if things start to go awry, I can't just let it flow away because I need to fix it, because I need to get to this goal. So do you see any aspect of that, or how do you think about that? Like ambition, drive, work ethic, all those things that come with it. I don't think they're exclusive from what you're saying, but I could see somebody thinking they might be. How do they factor into this?
So I was asked this question before, actually, by someone, I think by a colleague. Like, now that you have more work to do, like how do you balance? Do you feel free? Now you have more ambition and more work to do. So I think freedom comes with responsibility as well. It's not like if you completely aloof, if you completely just out there and free, then what's the point for it? You know, so the freedom comes from the inside. Now, if you don't take your responsibility, if you don't follow your ambition, do you actually feel free? Because do you actually feel happy, you know, when you're doing that? Because you feel like you're going against your gut. However, if you take that responsibility and follow your drive and your passion, does it make you feel proud about yourself? Does it make you feel like you have own achievement? And perhaps that will create more freedom for you down the line, because when you create more financial freedom within yourself, you have to put in the amount of work in the beginning, but then it's going to create more freedom for you later on, right? And so I think that I don't necessarily say that you have to put stress within yourself. I think certain amount of stress can be good, especially when is the healthy stress to drive you. It's like a force to drive you forward instead of like bring you down. I think it depends on your ego. Is like a positive ego or the negative ego. The negative ego the negative stress come from the negative ego is what hold you back. But the stress that you create on yourself, that drive from the positive ego to create something good for the world, something good for yourself, that come out of your passion, in a short amount of time, it's okay. But if this stress is like for a longer amount of time, if it's constant and it's permanent, then probably you're doing something wrong. I think for a short amount of time to have that stress, it's fine, because you kind of need it as the driving force to push you forward. But if at least if it goes if it goes with your heart and not against your heart, because if it goes against your heart, then you know that is you are on the wrong path. So for me, like I said, if I have the responsibility, I feel like I have responsibility, and I know that I have to contribute my time to do something that necessary, instead of going out there and have fun and explore, I would do that first, and then I would have some time and go explore. And I feel more free to go explore and have that time for myself, instead of like spending all the time and have fun and not taking that responsibility. So it's all about finding your own balance, the system that actually work for you. It's the system that have to work in alignment with your highest value, but at the same time not shifting yourself out of the balance.
Yeah. I mean, it makes perfect sense too, in terms of the awareness you said before, because it comes back to that. Like, for you to have a sense if you're in balance or not, you have to be aware enough of yourself to be able to distinguish between that stress that's positive, driving you forward, versus the negative, and being aware enough to say like, hey, I've felt pretty crappy now for the last 6 months working towards this goal that I think I want, but why do I feel so crazy? There must be something here. And you dig into that more, right? So maybe last question, V, wow, big picture question here. Like, what do you think, is there like a standard steady state or normal state for humans? Like, all of this in some ways is very simple, but at the same time, unbelievably hard, because our minds are so complex in how we try and do it. Why do you think that is? Like, are we trying to get back to a natural state that we've somehow gotten removed from? Or are we trying to overcome our own natural state of our minds to get to a better place?
That's a good question. Are we going against our own natural state?
Or are we going back to it? Yeah.
Are we going back to it? I think, do we actually know that we are normal? Because it's like the world is shifting inversely. We don't know what's normal and what not normal. So it's like when I live my way of my lifestyle, to other people they say it's not normal, but to me it's normal. It's all about your own perception as well. So what's normal and what not normal to you? I think that in spiritual practice, your essential self is your light being. So in a way, it feels not normal because we are not used to it. but it is normal because that is, or it's natural because that is the way it is. So I think it's also both way. So it's not natural for us because we are not used to it. We conditioned to not used to it. But it is natural because that's the way that we're supposed to go, or we're supposed to do. We're supposed to return to our own essential self.
But doesn't that beg the question, like, if it is natural, but we're conditioned against it, how did we get conditioned against it? Right? Did our natural state did it lead us astray, or did, like, we could talk about things, right? The media, we could talk about societal pressures, but in some ways that's all quote unquote natural. That's all humans just do it. Like, were we destined to get to this point where it was so hard for us to act naturally in accordance with the universe?
Yeah.
Like, there's a weird contradiction in that, you know?
Yeah, I think like I said, it's the natural term is kind of relative to each person and each culture and how we actually perceive it. And that's how we know that we're being conditioned. If it's not natural, if it's a natural way of being, but we don't feel it's natural. That's mean like there's something in our brain that's like we being programmed that way. So it's all about learning and unravel the myth, the wisdom, what's true and what's not true. And that's what it's taking us on a journey to find out what is truth. And that truth is only for you to know. Like, you have to own truth. Like, my truth is not your truth. Like, your truth, it depends on your path and your values. You create your own truth. So we each create our own reality and our own universe, right? And so that's the reason why we have experience and we have life. So life is for us to experience. And I that's why we need to take the left turn in order to know that we have to go right.
Like
and so we just have to experience this in our own way. And so I think that if it's not natural for you, but if it's natural for other people, then either you go on a journey and to explore it yourself, or go dig deep inside and ask yourself, is there a certain aspect about this that can be natural for me? Because like after seeing me living the van lifestyle, actually people around me started to question, like, maybe I should live this way too, because it seems so fun, it looks so fun, but it's just a little unnatural for them, because now they would have to leave their job, leave their family, leave their certain place. And for some people, they go ahead and go with it, but some don't, because they still cannot release a lot of burdens that they still carry. And so for me, I didn't know van life is actually my truth. I went for it because I was curious. I was curious to know about myself. I was curious to know about life. I wanted to have more time to explore, like not just the outer world, but also explore my inner world as well. Because at that time, I was questioning so much about my own existence, my life purpose, and I wanted to figure that out. And I knew I couldn't get that if I still living a normal way in the corporate world. I had to do something else differently, and I took that leap of faith, and that's what I did. And eventually, I found my own truth. Like, I was raised as a Catholic, and I have a lot of conflict with my mom now because we don't believe in the same thing anymore. I don't go to church anymore, but she does have a certain truth that holds truth for her, because she has worked her path, and some things on religion has helped her to overcome a lot of struggles in her life. And that's what she believed, and that's what give her the power and the drive to continue on living and overcome challenges in her life. But there's certain things in that religion I don't agree with, and I don't believe that it's true. So it's like she create her own truth according to what she believes in, according to what she's told. And so she creates her own reality. And because I don't believe in any of it, so I have to go find that out my own way. I have to find out my own truth. And by learning from other people and also by experiencing it myself. So everything that I learn from other people tell me, sometimes I believe it, sometimes I don't. And if I don't, I have to go and experience it and find it out for myself. And that's how I learned that to be true or not for me. For other people, they may have experienced it differently. And so it may not be true for them, and so that's why I say this process of alchemy is universal, but there's millions of paths. We all have to create our own path. Whatever that actually work for us, whatever that that's more aligned for us and true for us, and that's the path that we need to work. And that all have to come from the wisdom of the heart. Definitely it's not from the wisdom of the mind.
Listen, V, I thoroughly enjoy this conversation. I think it's a good mix of like really interesting philosophical questions about how we function, but also at the same time, really practical insights into how to live. And to your point, right, there's no direct blueprint here. It's not like, hey, read the book or follow this step A, B, C, D. What I really like about it is back to where you started is it's more principles based than rules based. It's more about a process where if you follow this process of awareness and freedom, that will lead you to better outcomes. And that in many ways allows for that freedom, because you don't feel constrained by I have to do it this way. You don't feel constrained that everybody has to see it the way I do, or that my mom or my spouse, whoever has to agree with it. It's this freedom to say, if I approach this and kind of go with the flow of life, I trust good things will come, and I don't have to be worried about beyond that. And I think that's super powerful and interesting. So yeah, I really enjoy it. I'm really grateful that you were on today and kind of shared this. Really, really, really do.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me here again. And I love all the questions. Very profound, very practical. And I love it when some people like just pick on my brain.
Well, that's what I hope. And that's what I hope for the show, is that for people listening, part of the reason I do the show is I think you're the perfect example. Somebody sometimes, and maybe I'm just projecting myself, but there's people that will listen to things like this and hear what you're saying and say, that sounds great, but it doesn't really work. Or it's not. So I'm part of what I want to do on this show is ask some of those questions to get to that deeper level and deeper response, so people are more willing to listen and more willing to try it. And I think you had, we did that today, I hope. So
yeah, no, I loved it. I love that perspective, and I love that it's the reason why I think that philosophy have to be practical.
Yes.
That's the reason why I wrote my book. I was like, this is the philosophy of alchemy, and I'm giving my life experience as a practical example how it go through this philosophy, like ancient wisdom. And I think it's so essential that philosophy has to work, because if it doesn't work in our life, then what's the point for learning that philosophy?
Yeah, well said. Well said. Well, V, thanks so much again. Really, really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Terry.
Hey, one more thing before you go. Don't forget to visit my website, livingthroughalchemy.com, to check out my book and download the first chapter for free. And if you have read the book already, don't forget to leave me the review on Amazon for good karma. And I would also love you for it. Thanks, guys. Bye.